take a look at this example. Here I have two characters, the XBot and Michelle, that I downloaded off of Mixamo here, performing the same animation. So they both have humanoid Unity rigs, and they can both perform the same idle animation. So I gave Michelle here the same player animation controller that we added on the XBot. Now that's really cool because we don't have to create different animations specific to each model. We can just create one animation and apply it on different models, given that they have the rig that allows for it. So I can actually go look at Michelle's rig here in my models. So I have Michelle, oops. So we can see that we have all the similar things as before. Things are still connected to the hips. And I can also go in my animations and notice I have no new animations. Now, when downloading and importing characters with textures like Michelle, there are a couple of few steps in actually getting the textures to work. So let's just quickly look at that, and then we'll get back to the animation stuff. Okay, so let's say I want to take this model called Pumpkin Hulk L. Shaw. I just randomly selected it. And I'm going to click on download. Okay, download to FBX. All right. I'm not going to rename it for this example. Put it in my models. Perfect. Okay, so now in my models, I should see it appear. Here we go. The Pumpkin Hulk L. Shaw. And notice its material. So its material is a solid color, and we don't have the textures. Now, that's not really a problem for our XBot, because our XBot just uses a solid color. So 2 solid colors to be more precise on its materials. There's no texture. But for this guy, if we want him to look like this, well, we can't have just this solid white material. Luckily, all we have to do is click here on our file, go into materials and click on extract textures. So I have this textures folder that I created. I'm going to select it, and we're just going to extract the textures in it. Now here Unity says that, well, one of these textures in the FBX file is called Pumpkin Hulk Normal, and this file should be mapped as a normal map, or should be marked, I should say, sorry, as a normal map. So I'm just going to click Fix Now. And now we can see, hey, this is looking a lot better. But what was this normal map business? Well, let's take a quick look at it. So I can go in textures now, and I see 2 new textures. These 4 textures come from Michelle. These 2 Pumpkin Hulk textures come from, well, the Pumpkin Hulk. So this is its base texture. It's basically just color. So how do I color the skin or the surface of the mesh, the surface of the geometry of the object, of the model? And then this normal map, you can see here, texture type is set to normal map. Make sure it's not on default, because that will mess up the model. If we take a look, we have this weird glossiness to it. However, if I fix that and take my texture and put this back to normal map, and I'm going to look at my model again after applying this modification, we can see that it's a lot better. Okay, so make sure that any image that looks like this one or this one, you can't tell when the image is a normal map because it has this color scheme and this kind of mesmerizing effect to it. These should always be marked as normal maps. So that will fix the quick issue that we saw. But what even is normal map? What's its purpose? This isn't a graphics course, so I won't go in detail. but it's basically what allows us to have this kind of bumpiness to the model. So you can see here, it's quite gruesome, but it looks like he has indents in his skin. Now, the actual 3D model itself, does that model contain the indents? Not really. Here's the geometry. Here's the model. I'm not seeing any of those lines. If we were to actually change this model to include all those lines, all the bumpy details, like especially here on this sort of weird rock horn on the shoulder, we would have so many triangles. Right now we have 9,620 triangles. If we added any more for all this detail, it can really go up quickly. And too many triangles, too many polygons means it's harder to render and harder to transform and harder for collisions and whatnot. So it's cool to have this simple geometry and then use the bump mapping or normal mapping trick to make it look like this or like this. So it's basically just a rendering trick that changes how the model is lit to make it look like, well, it's not completely smooth. So it gives more character, more texture to the surface of the skin. Now we can do something else. I'm going to click on extract materials here actually, and I'm going to select my materials folder. Great. So now I actually have this material, this Pumpkin Hulk material. This material right here, well, that's for Michelle. I should actually rename it because it's not really symbolic. So let's just take a look at this material now that we can apply to anything if we really wanted to. So applying it to these game objects doesn't make much sense because they're not really made for this texture. That's an entire discussion about UVs, which we won't get into. Again, not a graphics course. But let's just take for granted that the Pumpkin Hulk model has information, the necessary information that describes how to take this texture, this material, and apply it correctly onto its model. So what happens if we remove the base texture? Here we get to see the effect of the normal map. So again, this is just a simple torus. We can look at others if you want. So this is a simple sphere, a cube, but it looks more like detailed. It looks like there's depth on each face of this cube as if it was carved in. So that's one really cool thing with normal maps. If I remove it, we can see that it's really flat, it's smooth. Let's try the base texture here, just color without normal map. And now let's add in the normal map and we can see quite a difference. Okay, so that's just a quick thing that we gotta do in terms of textures and materials when working with more sophisticated characters that are not just solid in color, like the Xbot.